Welcome back to Biz 15, and it's a Yorkshire business podcast facilitated by me, Don Brook, owner and director of Brook Corporate Developments. Today we're going to be talking about all things leadership. So I'm just going to get straight into it, Stewart. You as a leadership consultant, what do you think actually defines a successful leader?
Well, a successful leader for me is the old adage, somebody that really does lead by example, somebody that builds trust with people that he works with or she works with, somebody that demonstrates attributes like commitment. It's a big one, reliability, and that solid base. And that doesn't mean that person's got to be the one that bangs the drum. Yeah. There's lots of different leadership styles that we can adopt, but it's that credibility, it's that trust, and it's that leading from the front. And with leadership, we mentioned culture in our previous podcast. You've got to define what it is, and this is a leader's role. Yeah. Define what the culture is. Teach people, embed it, what it is, and then live by it and show it. Yeah. That's for me what a real leader is. Yeah. And
Andrew, you've been in leadership roles. You've been in large corporate businesses. Same question to you. What defines a successful leader from your eyes?
I think I agree with a lot of things that Stewart said. He's somebody that does lead by example. That doesn't necessarily mean somebody that does everything themselves. Yeah. It's somebody that's got the confidence to allow their team to take responsibility for certain things and be able to feed into that. I think too many people, when they sort of get into a leadership role, think that it's their role to actually define everything that has to happen and dictate everything that happens, and that's not the case. A strong leader is someone that will utilise his team members and use their skill set and actually feel comfortable in their own skin to allow people to contribute to that for the benefit of the business.
From my experience, I've been in large corporate businesses where they've got that leadership and team leader structure. I've also managed quite large teams as well, and it's quite interesting really, because when I first got promoted into a team leader role, I finished on Friday as a team member, and then I came back into the office on a Monday, and then all of a sudden I was managing the people that I was team members with, and I was almost recruited into the role on skills, not experience, and I was kind of defined as a successful or a potential leader through having the right capabilities to be able to lead the team. But it was really difficult because you were part of the team and then all of a sudden you were leading the team. But that's where your skills kick in, because you have to have the right skills to then take yourself away from that team structure, and you're there to do a job, and that's what you're paid for.
It's a funny one, that, because that can be a good and a bad way to sort of get into leadership. I think it's one of the hardest ways to lead a team that you've previously been part of.
Absolutely.
I think if you've sort of integrated into that team well, and your colleagues see those skills in you, and you go in and you don't particularly change your personality, but you just start driving the right behaviours, which they will have already seen you do, then it's fine. But you can have an issue if, say, there was somebody else within that team that thinks that they should have had that role.
Absolutely.
That is a different skill set that you need then in terms of handling that situation.
Yeah, there's another interesting point to be had out of that example as well. I think for me, a leader, and it's almost a definition of what I think leadership is. A leader is somebody that can not only identify potential in others, but enhance that potential, encourage that potential, even to the point that that person may pass them in the organisation or in that's a real leader that can identify and enhance potential, even to the point where they could actually go past. That's real leadership.
I had a true-life example of that when I worked in banking, that we had a graduate came into the organisation and I was their mentor. And I remember actually saying in a meeting with them once, someday you'll be my boss. And it transpired. It was about 10 years later, but that person did end up becoming my boss.
I think it's then the true leaders are the ones that come to fruition with everything that they're saying. So I had exactly the same example where when I was recruited into a business as a young, ambitious 23-year-old, that my boss said, come and do this role, but you won't be doing this role forever. We'll go on our journey together through the business. And over the next 5 years, we both subsequently went up the business together, and for me, that was exactly what you needed as a new individual into a business that was hungry to succeed. Through having that supportive manager and supportive leader that you bought into, because you do everything for them that they're asking, and it just created that morale boost.
Yeah, I think. Moving into the leadership of a team you worked in, and different things that people are called in industry. People are called, a team leader, and then we get supervisor, and then we get manager, and then we get all these different things, these different terms, and it's interesting because if you look at, for example, the difference between the term leader and manager, what a leader does and what a manager does, and we might say, well, manager has control and systems and gets things done, and a leader might innovate and inspire, challenge, and all those things. I would hate it that we tagged. Right, well, you're a manager, not a leader, so therefore I don't want you to be innovative or challenge. I think we should encourage leadership at all levels, irrespective of to what the title is. Encourage it at all levels. I don't mean everybody, wants to run the company. I mean the traits of good leadership should be allowed at all levels to get the best from people.
And I actually think that leaders of teams are defined by the performance that they actually get from their team, which is what they're there to do. They're there to get the performance out of their team. But actually, a real leader should be someone who is facilitating the development of their team and encouraging the development of their team and using their skills to bring people forward in the business. And I do think that potentially goes unheard of, because you don't have that quantifiable performance at the end of it to say, well, I have led a team to be successful. But a leader would know that they've been successful by seeing the development of their team moving forward, whether that's actually achieving performance or helping them with their personal development, help them progress in the business, help them with new skills and new training. And sometimes linking back to some of the previous content that we've gone through around culture, I think it depends on the culture of the business as to how you're actually perceived as a leader in the business.
I must admit, I've had a circumstance where I was actually criticised for losing a number of staff over a 2-year period, who actually all went on to gain quite significant promotions. And I actually felt quite proud about that, because I contributed to those people developing their skill set and moving on. And in actual fact, I knew that within that team it was always going to be a bit of a revolving door, because if you were to develop that team for it to achieve its full potential, then that ultimately would mean that those people would move on, because there was almost a glass ceiling in terms of how far they could progress within that role.
Yeah, and in terms of your role as business support manager, Andrew, what are the key things that businesses that are inquiring about the services of Brook from a leadership standpoint? What are the main things that they're actually asking you to support with in relation to leadership?
One of the main ones really is, and Stewart touched on this in one of our previous sessions, was that people quite often get promoted into a role because they've been good. And you reflected on this in terms of your promotion. That doesn't necessarily mean, I don't mean this in your term, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to become a good manager or a good leader.
Oh, I was definitely a good manager.
Yeah, well, don't doubt it. But it's not always the case. Sometimes people are good at the role that they do or have done, but it doesn't necessarily make them a good leader, because they don't understand that. They can come in and start to do the wrong things.
And be almost promoted into a position of incompetence because through no fault of their own.
And that's quite often one of the things that we're finding is that people say, you know, we've got some really good staff, but we need to develop them, and we need to make these managers and their teams work as a whole to drive the business forward. And that's one of the key ones that I'm seeing. And also a couple of times we've had people that contacted that's been probably family-run business, and it's the senior people within the organisation have got the business to where it can, but they've had the foresight to see we actually can't take this business further. We need some help in this. And the good ones as well are the ones that don't just necessarily want it for themselves, but then they want to cascade that further down the team, so they get the benefit from what we go in and do with that business, and then they see actually the next group of people coming through would benefit from this as well, and that ultimately just has the benefit of that business as a whole gets better through the individuals getting better.
Yeah, completely agreed. And Stewart, you must have come across quite a number of people that may have inherited a role, or Joe Bloggs has been part of this business for 25 years. We need to promote him. They've promoted him or her, and all of a sudden the role's just not been right for them. What would you do in that situation to actually work with that individual?
Well, as I said, sometimes you can, you promote somebody, a really good operative, or a really good, functional role into a leadership role, and we end up losing a really good operative, and then potentially gaining a poor one. And a lot of this is about confidence. So, if I'm coaching, I'm mentoring about that. It's got to be about building confidence. So, knowledge, skills, and attitude around the role, and try and build confidence as much as you possibly can, and get them to do the basics right. It's like anything. When you start to look at process as a leader, as a manager, there's ways to do things, but different situations demand different approaches and different styles. So it's just giving them those knowledge, that skills, and the approach, the behaviour to get it right. More times they'll get it wrong.
I think that's a real key element of that as well, is because people have to understand that you can't manage everybody in the same way, because people will not respond to it. You have to adapt your style and language to who you're talking to, and that's a skill that not everybody has. They can't adapt to that and get that message across. Again, coming back to that age-old thing about its communication that makes the difference.
Well, it does, and dare I say, the motivation. Leaders getting the best from people and motivating people. People are motivated in different ways. We've all got a different reason for getting up in the morning and going and performing and doing things well. And we've got to understand as leaders what makes people tick. Coming from a sports world, sports background in a former life, quite often it were things that people didn't say to me that motivated me rather than what people did. Whereas lots of other people needed lots of reassurance, and that's all about leadership, communicating and getting the best from people.
And from your experience, Stewart, is there any key themes of shortages of leadership skills that you're coming across on a day-to-day basis within businesses? So is there a certain skill shortage that you've come across from all the businesses that you're working with, that once you've taken a 360 look over and gone, actually, I've just done a bit of analysis on the businesses that I'm working with, and this is missing in every single business that I'm working with?
Without a doubt, people can be leaders, but the missing bit for me is people don't always think strategically. So as a leader, that's part of your role as the MD, as a leader. I'm not saying the MD is the only leader. I said I prefer leadership at all levels, but you've got to think strategically, and coming up with strategy is one thing. interpreting that and translating that into operational doing plans, things is the hard bit, and that's the gap. Getting people to think strategically and then translating and those strategies into operationally